Peter, thank you very much for joining today. Why don't we kick off by telling us a little bit about you?
Sure. Thanks, Christina, and thanks for inviting me to this. My background, I spent 24 years with one organization, ISS, so joined them straight out of college and sort of grew up through the organization. Left them in 18 to join WeWork for a brief and interesting, intense moment, going through all the things that they were going through with the IPO that didn't happen and then being taken over by SoftBank. And then I joined in 1st of April, I joined JLL in a role as a global lead of facility management and workplace experience. So that's my sort of professional life in a few headlines. And then extracurricular activities, I'm the chair of the International Facility Management Board of Directors also, and I've been heavily involved with IFMA for a long while now, which I thoroughly enjoy.
Fantastic. And indeed, you have had your vice chair of IFMA before becoming chair, right?
Yeah, it's sort of a grooming process where they lead you into the chair role. So you start off as being part of the executive committee, and that's a 4-year commitment. So you go through second vice chair, first vice chair, chairman, and then immediate past chair to sort of pass on your knowledge and your initiatives on to the next person. But it's actually a very good process. So I've enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun and a great learning process for me as well.
Fantastic. So, I mean, between these 3 roles and your role within IFMA, you've seen a lot around the change of real estate. You know, looking forward to the next 2 to 5 years, what would you say about your top client learnings and how they're going to be adapting to the new world of work?
I think it's really changed. It's really interesting because I mean I think we're at that inflection point right now at the moment. I think some of the changes we've seen in the marketplace over the last 20 years are happening now, and it's going extremely fast. So I was talking to a colleague of mine a couple of months ago, and I said it's so funny because all of the stuff that we've been talking about for a while now, it's happening, and it's going very fast. So there is a silver lining to all the bad things that have happened around COVID-19. There is a silver lining about how it has accelerated the speed of change within the facility management and corporate real estate sector, and even to an extent where you can really talk about facility management and even cleaning is now becoming sexy and attractive sort of professions now that also attract a new breed of talent into our industry, which we need. So there's really been a lot of stuff happening. I think around COVID-19, some of the changes that we are seeing are not happening because of COVID-19, because they were happening before, but they're just accelerating through COVID-19. And I think that's also what we can see with our clients, is that their interest in trying out new things, their interest in digitizing the workplace, focusing more on how to bring employees back to the workplace for an experience rather than just heavy-duty work has changed. The mentality around it that has changed quite dramatically over the last 6, 7, 8 months now. So a lot of changes happening, which I find quite fascinating, especially as I spend my entire life in this industry. So you can really see those changes happening quite quickly.
So what you're talking about, this change towards the workplace experience and bringing together digital solutions with FM, it's a really interesting one to dig into, because historically it's been challenging to modernize FM because many decisions were on a site-by-site basis, and there wasn't always a clear line of control between IT, HR, FM, corporate real estate, property. How are you seeing that change today?
Well, there's much more integration, and there's a much bigger interest from the client side to do this. I think historically the industry has been through a controlled outsourcing process, where it's typically has been the primary driver has been cost containment or cost savings. And cost will always be important. It will continue to be important both during and after COVID-19, no doubt about that. But I think there's a bigger willingness to test out new things, And then there's a much deeper understanding of the interrelationship between IT, technology, workplace experience, employee engagement, satisfaction, the cultural aspects of belonging to an organization, and these things begin to play together. So there's a different value proposition that we're beginning to see in the marketplace that sits above cost reductions. It's more the investment in people. It's about creating a stronger sense of community, providing an experience when you come to work, rather than just giving people a desk and saying, here you are, go work and stay productive. Because now with COVID-19, and especially with working from home, we understand that people can be productive in other environments, and it's actually very individually based where you thrive in and which kind of environment that you feel most productive in. And it doesn't only change according to individual needs, it also changes to the situational needs. So you might have a certain part of your day you want to spend at home because you need to concentrate and you don't want to be disturbed by all external factors. And then you go in, have a meeting with your client, maybe at an office or maybe at a flex office somewhere. And then you are more socially inclined, that you want to have that human interaction. You want to discuss a few issues you have with a boss or a peer or whatever. And I think the workplace and the setup with all the digital solutions that we have, the way that we engage people at work, have to accommodate that shift in mentality and that shift in work style. During a month, a week, a day, almost down to the hour, and because it's individually oriented, the level of flexibility and agility around the workplace has increased dramatically and will continue to increase, I believe. So again, we are not fully set up for that, but I think there's a lot of technical solutions out there. There's a lot of tools and processes around workplace engagement and workplace experience that will help us along the way. And it's shifting the role from FM to be that back office type of conduit, that the invisible hand that goes around the office and makes sure everything works, to be much more front and center of that experience, and actually be the person that ties all this stuff together in a much more coherent experience for the employee when they come to work, and making sure that everything works and all the touch points supports that level of flexibility that we are looking for. So I think that's quite exciting, and that's a big change that the industry is going through at the moment.
It is quite fun. It's seeing the FM services role really front and center, and people, I think, didn't quite appreciate FM until now. It's the classic, you don't realize what you got till it's gone. And I think everybody is at first very excited to work from home, or many people were. And as it's drawn along, and as people have progressively gotten burned out, we've noticed many of the organizations I speak with, teams are feeling more siloed because they don't have those micro collisions. And they're beginning to realize that the design teams carefully designed all of the offices to facilitate micro collisions and teamwork and all of that. And this whole idea of activity-based working, which the BBC is discovering for the first time ever, and all the people are discovering what we've been pushing for the last decade. It's no longer confined to an office or indeed a building. It's not even confined to a city. It's activity-based working globally. Are you going to live in the countryside and then come into the office sometime, go to your local co-working other times? But the impacts of that, both from a technology point of view and from a real estate point of view, are massive. So from a JLL perspective, how do you see the rebalancing of portfolios for corporate real estate to respond to the global activity-based working approach?
Again, I think what we'll see over the next couple of years is quite a big change, especially large corporates. But I think that there's going to be changes, going to be variations of that change in large corporates, SMEs, and small startup type of businesses. But if we concentrate on the large corporates just for a short moment, I think we'll see that we'll still see the large beautiful head offices. And they need them because they are brand statements and cultural statements, and you want to get your people in to be immersed in that corporate culture that you want to have. I think one of my favorite examples are some of the sports manufacturing goods companies like Nike and Adidas. If you go to their corporate head offices, you really get immersed in that sports culture and what the brand is all about, which I think is absolutely fascinating. So I think the corporate offices are going to stay, and they're even going to evolve. They may even get bigger, and they're going to be more creative and more find new ways of expressing in your brand and your corporate culture. But then I think once we begin to look at regional offices and also local offices, representative offices around the world that the organization may have, I think we'll find differences there, which is also what we talk about at JLL as the hub and club model. So they're going to be more satellite offices. They may be owned by the corporation if they're big enough, but they may not be owned by the corporations either. I think it's going to be a much more flexible model, and especially the flex space, co-working space, offer some really interesting opportunities there to stay agile, to stay flexible, to be able to scale up and down according to the business needs that you see, and then just have that club where it may not be Peter's table and a dedicated space for me when I come in and work, but it's a table, it's a hot desk, it's a place that I can go, I can meet my colleagues, I can have conversations, I can have meetings, and I can do occasional work. But I think that flexibility of having home working and then a flex space, I think is incredibly attractive, also from a real estate point of view and a portfolio point of view. Now some of the large corporates are so large that also the regional offices want to exude that brand statement. But I think once we go to that lower level where it's about 300, 400, 500 people at an office, I think we will see a growth in the flex space model that we have on this, which I think will help out these organizations in a tremendous way, and even more on a local scale. So when you then come down to having offices with the size of 20 to 100 people, I think the flex offices again provides that opportunity to have something without having a big piece on your balance sheet that you have to and that you have to work with and to be dragged into asset management and all that stuff. So I think there is some attractiveness on the flex model. It may not have found its exact form yet, but I think what we have seen over the last 10 years, we've seen that development. I think especially a lot of the investors and real estate owners, they're now looking into that flex model as well to just make that part of when they're building offices. There's going to be a certain component of that's going to be a flex office. So you have that scalability and that flexibility in the way you manage your portfolio. So I think that's at least that's what we are seeing. And then also head offices. I think dragging people into a corporate head offices is still a different value proposition now, because people can work from anywhere, especially home, and they will work from anywhere. So that attractiveness around the workplace and bringing people in, because it's fun, it's engaging, it's collaborative, it's what I need at that particular point in time. That's going to be a different part of the equation. Instead of just having a place to work, it's going to be much more because I want to go there. I want to meet my colleague. I want to socialize. I want to engage. I maybe even want to go there for the great coffee or the great lunch or whatever it is that you do. And I think that forces us to think differently about the workplace and also about the densification, and especially now the de-densification of the workplace during COVID-19. But I think that's just a phase that we'll go through. We'll get back into making sure that we get the highest return on investment in our real estate investments again at some point.
I think that there is a lot of talk about de-densification, but I do think, even in London, some of the offices that we were working with have a 10-to-1 employee to desk ratio. Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised to see more of that. But you need technology to help that, right? To be able to say, all right, who's coming in on this day, so that you don't have an all hands meeting for sales, finance, and operations all on the same day and nobody's got any space.
No, exactly. No, and you also, the technology also needs to evolve into knowing who's you can have random social interactions and you can have more planned social interactions, right? That you want to meet somebody and you don't want to go in and just by chance saying, ah, man, I need to talk to my boss, but I don't want to book a meeting with him. It's just, I just have these couple of questions that if I see her, then, you know, we can connect over a cup of coffee or whatever. But you need to know whether that person is in the office or not. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult. And that's going to be an increasingly difficult thing to do in the future. So you need that technology to help us to say who is actually in the office, where they're actually sitting. If you have several floors or you have a big office, just finding your way and figuring out where is my team sitting, where do I need to sit in this particular day. So there's still a lot of stuff that some of it is already developed, but more also needs to be developed as we move on and getting more and more used to this way of working. So you diminish the randomness and you increase sort of the planned social random interactions, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. Because I mean, I think the threshold for people to be happy to go into the office has been raised exponentially. Yeah. So the people who used to have a, stay with their family nearby central London or central Paris or New York during the week and then go back and see their husband and their children on the weekend. And I think that's really dead. People come in because there's an all hands, because there's a lunch, because they'd like to collaborate, or because they're earlier in their career and they need that informal mentorship.
Yeah, but because I think that's an important point, is that there are, I mean, as facility managers, we also need to begin and to work closely with HR and their HR group and begin to segment, to have profiles and personas of the people, coming to the offices, working from the offices, because we are different. And to your point, I think younger people coming straight out of college, and we can see that in some of the research that we have done with IFMA, is that they have a need, that there's a reasons why they want to come to the office. First of all, they may have a smaller apartment and may not have the space to effectively and pleasantly work from home. Secondly, they do have a need to capture, knowledge, learnings, best practices, to talk to the person next to you about, how do you do this? How do you whatever, book a meeting, connect the people to, send out an invitation that is effective. Some of these basic things that you just need to learn, the trick of the trades. And if you're working from home and if you're working secluded, you won't get that. So they have a bigger need to get to the office than a person who has been 20 years with the company, of course. And we also need to understand these dynamics and how to design the office environment, but also how to design the logistics around the office environment according to this. So it's not a trivial, easy solution, and it's something that will mature over time. But we need to get on that journey, and that journey has it started a long time ago, maybe 8-10 years ago, but it's accelerating right now. And I think once we get to the other side of COVID-19, eventually, I think we will also see some completely different demands from the users, the employees of the building, the leadership and management, but also what's actually available, what's possible now with the new technologies, the new ideas around community and workplace experience and that type of thing. And I think that's going to be a lot of change requests for the corporate real estate and facility management functions as we're moving into that space. I think there's going to be a lot of stuff happening in our industry over the next from now on and the next 5 years ahead of us.
Great. It's exciting stuff. Taking a quick pivot, just, one of the big things around COVID-19 is the duty of care that employers have to their staff. And this comes from a perspective of knowing who has been on site at all times and controlling who can and cannot come on site. Yeah. Where do you see that merging in this hub and club model of the future?
I think the way it's been done now, it's a very sort of phased and staggered approach that you simply ask people to say, you and your team can work Mondays and Wednesdays, and Some others can work Thursdays and Fridays, because you want to have that dedensification of the workplace due to social distancing and just being in control of things and managing the logistics through the office in a smart way. I think technology will have a very big place in that, and we need to understand who is in and who's out, and how do you register people and trace people if something happens. So I think, you know, for the way we move forward with this, with the hub and club model, I think that is something we need to manage as more and more people come back to the office, as more and more people will come into the office on certain days. We will have to manage that in a smart way. There has to be room for everybody once they get to the office, and we need to sort of control that environment in an effective and smart way. So especially if you have an HQ, headquarter, where it's like everybody can come in and everybody will come in. To your point from before, we need to know, are there other meetings planned at the same time, and you need to have that complete overview in terms of what's happening in the office, what's available, can I sit there, but also some of the amenities, you know, for the individual to say, you know, is this a good day to come, or are there other days that I should come? Both in terms of some of the practicalities and availabilities of a desk or a meeting room or whatever you need for that particular day, but also some of the soft areas in terms of saying, okay, what's on the menu today? Are they serving my favorite dish down in the canteen, or should I wait till tomorrow when they do? Is there a barista? Do I get into the office hour where the barista is available so I can get a good cup of coffee? Or are there places in the gym, you know, because when I go into the office, I might as well take an hour at the gym and, you know, get stuff done on my personal health. So I think that's important. But I think to that point, and to your question on health and well-being, I think some of the research that we have done, both with the JLL but also with IFMA, especially, we're launching a new study next week called the Future of Work Delphi survey, where we got a lot of experts to work on some specific statements. And I think one of the conclusions from that study is actually on that exact point, health and well-being. It's a huge concern for corporations and leadership in general, how their people are doing. And of course it is, because we are now all exposed to this COVID-19 pandemic. But there are other aspects of that. There's also mental health. People are sitting at home, feeling secluded, maybe feeling even lonely, could be having mental illness, mental health issues around stress and around just not having that social interactions to the same level as you had before. And these are some of the, I know these are top of mind. We can see that on our surveys for many organizations, most organizations. And that's definitely something that we may not necessarily, as facility managers, take responsibility of, because I think it rests more within the HR area of responsibilities. But I think we need to be part of, and we need to be part of coming up with solutions together with HR to solve some of these problems, and to make sure that we bring our whole self and a healthy self to work, whether we are working from home or we are working from an office environment. So I think these are important issues, and these are also issues that will increase in importance, but also increase in our understanding of how to gauge for some of this, because these are difficult questions, and these are not typical questions we have learned as managers to ask. So I think it also changes the management style of the organization to begin to understand, how can I gauge, how can I understand, how can I begin to probe into questions on how are you doing, how are you coping with the situation, are you overworked, are you stressed, do you actually take time off, how do you take time off, you know, some of these questions that for some are slightly uncomfortable, but I think they are extremely important, that we begin to focus on these things and begin also to find solutions, and maybe even, you know, begin to force people into the office for the only reason of having those social interactions, because you can feel that a person is getting more and more secluded, and they're not, you know, doing whatever Friday virtual cocktail hours or whatever it may be, but you know, begin to bring them in also to make sure you get that level of connectivity that we all need.
It's actually, so I mean, what you're talking about right now reminds me a lot of some of the interviews that they did on soldiers during World War II. And they came on in and they came to these soldiers and they said, you ran into the face of machine gun fire. Yeah. Was it for God? Was it for country? And all of them pretty much said, I didn't want to let down an ace. Yeah. And so this idea of having that community, that peer pressure, it's having to look into the eyes of your colleagues and say, if I don't do this, I'll be letting somebody down.
I agree with that. But again, it probably requires something different that we're not entirely ready for yet. But you know, how do you? I think there's been a lot of research and a lot of good input on how do you manage virtual teams? How do you manage teams that are not part of your immediate view? You know, sitting together with you in an office. But that's an area where I think we probably need to do more of, because you will probably have in your team setup people that you'll never see. I've in this special situation. I started on 1st of April with, you know, during lockdown in my new work. I have a team of 8 people reporting directly into me. I've never had physical, you know, contact with them. I've never met them. I don't know if they're large or small. I only see, you know, the top, 25% of their body on these types of meetings. So I think it works. But you know, I can't wait till the day that I can actually meet them face to face. You know, have a cup of coffee, have a beer, have a dinner. And I think that also needs to find a balance at some point when we are able to do that again. That I don't believe that we've stopped traveling. I think we'll still do that. We'll not do it as frequently and as often as we did before. But I think that physical interface is extremely important. And then the other point I wanted to make on your World War II story, I think is also well put, because I think, you know, there'll probably be a reminiscence or something equal to post-traumatic stress that we probably also need to deal with, and HR and leadership needs to deal with. There are probably different variation of it, and I don't want to compare it to soldiers or anything like that. That would be too far-fetched, but there'll probably be a variation of that somehow. People have been going through this, have been going through all the motions of sitting at home, dealing with all this stuff we have to deal with, and finding a rhythm in terms of your work style and how you get stuff done. Some deal well with it, others, and a select few, but there's just some that doesn't deal with it at all. We also need to make sure we pick those persons up and make sure we include them also in you know, the future state that we're going into here.
It's a good point, because, you know, for at least the Judeo-Christian religions, it's a religion where people grieve in a big community. And in some ways, this is kind of the end of a certain type of world, and nobody has been able to grieve in a community. It's been, you know, very virtual or alone. It's a definite shift.
That's a good point.
I find that statistics sometimes play well. Do you have any recent research with an interesting statistic on the return?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, the statistics. I mean, at IFMA in I think it was in June, we did a work from home survey together with the Workplace Evolutionary community, and it showed that it was around 7% of the world population that actively used working from home 1 day or more a week. And that we then asked a large group of people, of more than 3,000 people answered the survey, and that the expectation is that number is going to be 53% of the world's populations that are going to be working from home 1 day or more post-pandemic. So even though it's a couple of months old, I think that's quite interesting, actually, that it's such a dramatic change that will then drive change in everything else according to, you know, the workplace, the way we work, the setup, the leadership style, and all that we have talked about. But I think that 7 to 53%, that's a quite remarkable shift in that particular area, which I find very, very you know, interesting.
Thank you. Perfect. All right. I think we're wrap. We're done early. Thank you for your time.
No, thank you, Christina. It was good. It was a pleasure seeing you.
You
All right,
too.
take care.